Hi, everyone. This is Kale Mary.
And this is Soda.
We are back with another podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the new show, Strange New Worlds, airing on CBS. And Soda and I have made a pact to watch the first two episodes and talk about them as today's topic.
Yes, sadly I broke this back and watched ahead, but I'm still going to talk mostly about the first two episodes.
Yes, try not to spoil me too much for some of
I'll
the things that
try,
go
I'll
on.
try, I'll try. I just think, I think I have a clearer picture of what the show is about, basically, of what I like and dislike about it. Let's just say I have a lot to say about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I'm very, very interested in hearing your perspective, Soda. Now, for you, going in to watch Strange New Worlds, you have seen Discovery.
I have seen Discovery,
And in
yes.
particular, you've seen the season that introduced
Mhm.
Ensign Mount's Captain Christopher Pike and Ethan Peck's Spock
Yes, and number one, Una.
and number one Una.
Yeah. Yes, I have seen this. I have seen that season. It does come up in the show itself, even as early as the first episode. I'm sure you've noticed. Um,
I'm going to be very interested to hear how that made your viewing experience a little different than mine. I will say, as someone who has seen Discovery, but not particularly that second season, I didn't have a feel for the characters as they
mm,
play them, and I did know a little bit about the plot, so I figured some things out. But it took me a minute to recognize when I needed to go back to my very limited Discovery knowledge to make sense of some things. So,
yeah,
as you said in the first episode, it is helpful if you know something about what happened.
yeah. I was going to ask you the same thing because I feel like as someone who did see Discovery, even if I don't, no, I haven't rewatched the second season since it aired. So even if I don't remember every little detail, I'm like, I think the characters are broad enough and well defined enough that you can kind of get to know them pretty soon, like as the episode goes. But all the plot elements that relate back to Discovery, I was very curious how someone who has not seen Discovery feels about that because the first episode is basically all a reference to Discovery season two. Um,
Yeah.
from starting with Captain Pike's, conflict about knowing his own future to the trouble they encounter with the world discovering warp, warp technology because of the events of Discovery.
So my reaction, like my first feeling when they really started the show, past that little part where they're showing this planet of people who are experiencing a UFO incident.
Yeah.
Um, when you switch over to Pike in Montana, well, I could tell based on the conversation he was having with his guest that he was experiencing something. Um, I was confused at first. Let me just say there was confusion for me in the first episode at several different points, but whenever he has that flashback to what I presume is what he saw in Discovery,
Yeah.
the Discovery
Yeah.
show, I made the connection to what he was seeing. One, because I know, I mean, we all know like what happens to his character in the original series,
Yeah.
but I did know that he had seen the future in Discovery. So probably if I didn't know that fact, I wouldn't have been able to work it out so quickly. I would have been even more confused. But it took me a minute to get there, and I just thought to myself, gee, if I didn't know this like single fact that he's seen his own future, which is a future we know of from the original series, I would be lost.
Yeah.
I would
I'm
be
wondering.
lost.
I mean, imagine someone who not only hasn't seen Discovery but also hasn't seen the original series watching this.
True.
I'm genuinely wondering if they kind of understood what's going on because it's very um, it relates back to all this. And I think I'm going to talk about this further later on. I think
Mm-hmm.
about how this show relates to the original series and what I think about the way it relates to it. But yeah, I was genuinely curious to see if this show was kind of accessible to new fans.
It was difficult the first time. Now, I watched the first episode twice. And I gave
Yeah,
it a week in between. So the first time I maybe was a little overwhelmed at first, just one because I was watching a new Star Trek show. I love Star Trek. And I couldn't sort my feelings for it right away. There was a lot of confusion. But once I had seen the whole episode through, I kind of knew like what the plot line was. When I went back and rewatched it, it went a lot smoother. But I think they taught me something about what had happened in Discovery. Probably more than I would have ever just known like the basic facts.
yeah,
The other thing is, if you don't know that Spock has a sister, you're going to be completely thrown off by some of their conversation in the beginning. So there's just like little things that if you've not seen Discovery, you've like had your head buried in the sand and have not seen all the news articles about certain things or topics. There's a lot that's just going to leave you with a big question mark.
yeah. That's what I figured, honestly.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's interesting they chose to open a season with an episode that is so, so heavily about what happened in another
Yeah.
show.
They basically just pick up with Pike and Spock kind of where they left off in Discovery, maybe
Yeah.
just a short while after, but not too long.
Yeah.
I will tell you what. We'll talk about the episode in more detail and what happened. But at the end of the episode, when they kind of talk about Starfleet Command's reasons for not punishing anybody for their actions, particularly Pike, like the whole reasoning for that, and like how this planet got their technology, I missed that the first time around.
Mm,
That specific stuff I didn't know about Discovery, like how the scenario played out where the ship goes to the future.
I see.
It kind of went over my head, and I was like, what are they talking about? I knew the ship went to the future. I just didn't know how it happened. I didn't watch, I haven't seen that actual episode or episodes, and watching on the second time, I picked it up. I was like, oh, okay. Wow.
I see.
So I did a lot more focusing on how the actors were playing their characters, what characters were being introduced or reintroduced. Um, and a lot of the Discovery stuff in the background that was the setup for the episode and sort of the reason why the episode happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because another thing is we get a lot of the main characters on this show are characters that already exist. They're not new
Yeah.
characters.
Yes.
We have, well, Captain Pike in number one, Spock, obviously, Uhura, Dr. Mbenga, Christine Chapel, Sam Kirk, of all people.
We get Lieutenant Kyle, which is actually a returning character. We even get Robert April, who was kind of like a name that was referenced in like one episode and was sort of one of Roddenberry's favorite pseudonyms.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I made a list. I made a list while I watched it the second time and went, yeah, there's quite a few name drops returning characters in the first episode alone. There's a lot. So, like I said, it was kind of overwhelming on the first watch. I enjoyed it a lot more on the second watch.
And although she is technically a new character, Lan Noonien Singh, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, related to Khan.
Yeah. Is she related to Khan? I couldn't decide.
Yeah.
I thought she might be. I'm like, Noonien Singh just seems to be a name they love. Isn't it similar to the Data's creator?
Not to be a spoiler, but in the third episode, she confirms she is a descendant of Khan.
So they answer that question. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nudie and Singh to me will always be like, you say that, I think Khan,
Yeah,
without a doubt. That's my first
yeah,
go-to, and that
yeah.
was my
She is.
first thought when they talked about this actress and what character she would be playing. I was like, interesting.
Yeah, there is no coincidence.
Okay.
Obviously they called her that for a reason. Yeah, but yeah, she is a descendant of Khan. So yeah, a lot of characters that are either characters that already exist or referencing characters that already related to characters that already exist, which is an interesting choice. Of the new characters that we do get, we have Lieutenant Ortega, right? She's lieutenant.
Yeah, the pilot,
Yeah,
Ortegas.
yeah, Ortegas. So, yeah, and the Andorian chief of engineering. Um,
Hemmer.
his name is Hammer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do we get another major new character aside from them?
There's a couple of, I think, reoccurring characters on the bridge. The only one that stood out to me was Ensign Christina, but I'm almost like, is that her first name or her last name? Does she not get a last name? So she's definitely not a main bridge crew character, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting to me that they have a new character as the chief of engineering because Scotty was kind of the oldest serving crew member on the original series.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Let me be honest. I'm getting a little confused about some of these returning characters and why they might be on the Enterprise under Pike.
Mm-hmm.
Because for some of them, particularly, I kind of assumed if they showed up on the Enterprise in one of the first 3 years, it's the first time they had been there. So Mbinga's a good one.
Yeah.
I in no way thought that he was. Is he the chief medical officer in this show?
He seems to be. He seems to be, which also raises a question. Like, if he's the chief now, why does McCoy become the chief when he comes aboard?
Exactly. There's things that confuse me. We forgot one character, one returning character named T'Pring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I have thoughts about Spring.
I'm with you. There's some discrepancies in my mind. In my mind, it
Yeah.
may just be a fan's perspective and what expecting like, oh, maybe Scotty's been on that ship the longest of anybody. I don't know. It's making me rethink that everybody just transfer brand new to the Enterprise with Kirk except for Spock and
Yeah.
I mean, but then Uhura, right? She's a cadet under Pike. She's a cadet on this show.
Yeah. Which I think makes sense.
And she obviously, like, being a cadet, she's going to get other assignments. She's going to go to other ships as she goes along in her career and probably could end up back on the Enterprise. But it was a nice way to get her character back into the show. It was a clever way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. She doesn't have to get on other ships. I mean, the Enterprise is the flagship of the fleet. It's like the best position she can be in. So I wouldn't be surprised if she just stayed there.
True, but my one remark on that is she really must be a prodigy if she's kind of running communications on the bridge
as a
cadet, and then by the time Kirk shows up, she's almost like head of communications of the ship.
Yeah.
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 But I mean, I could get there. I like her character, so I could get there.
Yeah, she's a fun character. She's a nice character. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think, all of the characters that we discussed that were brought up are characters that didn't really get a lot of screen time.
Yes.
Like, they existed, but, I mean, look at Sam Kirk. The only time we saw him is dying, so...
Don't you just love that they still gave him the mustache?
Yeah.
It just harkens back to Shatner passed out on the floor with a mustache, thinking, oh, that's Jim Kirk's brother.
Yeah.
They look very alike. Except for the mustache.
Except for the mustache. It was also kind of a nice bait and switch because they were like, oh, here comes Lieutenant Kirk, and here comes Sam Kirk.
Yeah. Yeah, and you make a good point about some of the characters didn't have a lot of background. I mean, even Uhura, we're going to get a
Yeah,
lot more background on Uhura than we ever got in the original series or after.
I, we got more background on Uhura in one episode than
Yeah.
we did about her during the entire original show.
But like Lieutenant Kyle, for instance, he's manning the transporter in both episodes. And he was actually sort of like a transporter chief in the original series, but he had one appearance. And then maybe a couple of repeat appearances later on.
I honestly don't remember him in the original series.
I recognized his name, but I could not, for the life of me, remember what he looked like, what he did. And so when they have him manning the transport, I'm like, oh, okay, it's a name I recognize. There's literally nothing else I know about this man.
Yeah, he's like the O'Brien of Strange New Worlds, I think.
Yeah.
The O'Brien as O'Brien was in the Next Generation,
Yeah.
not in Deep Space Nine.
True. I think the other thing I didn't expect was La'an would have a history with Una.
Yeah.
Also, can I just say I love the fact that they used the name Una?
Yeah,
They went with
it's
kind
good.
of what was not quite official canon and made it work. It made it canon. I love that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I honestly didn't know. I didn't really read a lot about Strange New Worlds before I started watching it, so I didn't know what kind of characters we are going to get,
Hmm.
and I didn't really expect anything of Lan's character because I didn't know we were going to get it. So then, um, yeah, it was an interesting setup. It gets more interesting later on.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the show is doing a very good job
Hmm.
of explaining the connection between them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The other thing is Uhura and Chapel meet for the first time in the first episode.
yeah,
And that was something that was in the original series, right? Like their friendship.
yeah.
So that's something I'm going to be looking forward to. And we can talk more about what we look forward to in the series, or whether I can because you've already watched a number of episodes. But it was nice to see some of that.
Yeah,
So should we just jump into the first episode, just kind of talking about,
yeah.
what it was
Let's
about and some of the fun things that happened and things we got to see?
exactly. Yeah, let's start. Okay. So the first episode. After the events of Discovery Season 2, where Pike basically got a vision that in 10 years or so, he's going to go through a pretty horrific accident and be become disabled very heavily disabled. And well, he's taking some time off from Starfleet to consider how to handle this. He wonders if he should maybe quit so he will avoid the accident. He's having some hard time, and the problem is that while he's on a retreat in Montana, kind of organizing his thoughts, the Enterprise under the command of Una, his number one, um, has gone to meet with a world that has recently shown signs of warp capabilities. The problem is the spaceship, the crew disappeared. Uh, the command, um, the command personnel disappeared after they went to this world. So Pike was tasked with going and investigating what's going on, and then he discovers that the world that they went to congratulate for achieving warp capabilities did achieve warp capabilities. It just didn't achieve warp capabilities in the sense of going to space. It achieved warp capabilities in the sense of developing a warp bomb, weapons based on warp technology. Yeah, and the reason that the world in question managed to develop those capabilities is because of the events of Discovery Season 2, where the the Discovery Season 2 is very complicated. I'm not going to go into it. But suffice to say, the people on the world noticed what was happening and I don't know how they managed to learn warp technology from that, but they did it.
They just said they reversed engineered it and left it at that.
Yeah,
I don't know how you reverse engineer something you're watching from a distance through a telescope.
yeah, that's interesting. But okay, let's assume they did it, and yeah, and the world itself is in conflict. It's not very technologically advanced. It's very analogous to modern day Earth, and well, the problem is basically resolved by by Pike going in with a very inspiring speech.
That's definitely what happens. Again, I mentioned the first scene that opens Strange New Worlds. The first episode is this race of people noticing a ship outside their planet in orbit, and they're like, that's not one of our UFOs. I thought that was a strange comet, but it's like we don't know whose UFO that is. And like you said, in the course of Una and her crew thinking they're doing a first contact, some of them get captured. Yeah, so it's in a sense it's pretty hilarious because it's this pre-warp society minus the warp bomb, which they're just gonna use to blow each other up. This pre-warp society that is confirmed not only this UFO but has captured some aliens. But then on the reverse side of it, there's funny things that happen, like when they beam up the two like native scientists up onto the Enterprise, they wake up, and so it's kind of like, oh, they got abducted by the aliens. It's just very, it's kind of like tongue in cheek with the things that we that happen in modern day Earth, like you said, UFOs and alien abductions, and but you're seeing that from the perspective of the aliens, which happen to
Exactly.
be Starfleet.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. I knew something was up with Pike from his like little thing in Montana. That whole conversation where his guest says, something's bothering you. Do you want to talk about it? And he just kind of avoids the conversation. And then, of course, he has moments on the bridge where his mind is still caught up in that horrific scene of his like half melted face.
Yeah.
That vision of the future. Spock comes in to talk to him about it. So you definitely know he's basically got sounds like some PTSD for an event that hasn't happened yet, but just knowing that it's going to happen has kind of traumatized him. He's working through it, like you said. I got that. But then the whole explanation of the pre-warp society looking through the telescopes and seeing the events that happened at the end of season 2 Discovery and reverse engineering technology, I missed that whole part the first time. I really did. All I went was, wait, they're not spacefaring, they just have a warp bomb.
Yeah.
I missed that whole explanation. Probably because I didn't understand it as they
Yeah,
explained it.
I can see that. I can see that. It's not explained very well.
I was kind of
Um,
like, what are you
I,
talking about?
I also get the feeling that maybe they kind of didn't explain it too much because they didn't. Maybe they kind of figured, okay, let's not talk too much about Discovery. We
Yeah.
have like a new show to discuss. Um, Also, the plot of the episode, I think it's interesting that aside from Pike, they did give more of a space to the newer characters, the ones that weren't there during the season 2 of Discovery. Spock and Una are held captive, but so we get more of Uhura and Benga and Christine Chapel and Ortega's. We don't get much Hammer, but he'll come along. So yeah, it's interesting to see that. I think it was a smart decision actually. Um,
I kind of liked how their first episode out the gate was addressing General Order 1, which is
yeah,
pre Prime Directive.
yeah,
I thought that was interesting. But also just the whole fact that, you're looking at a pre warp society that's not sure about extraterrestrial life. Or maybe the government is sure, but the citizens are not. And then it's that whole perspective, like from the aliens' perspective, was kind of funny. But can we talk about a second, like General Order 1? So,
I think episode 2 talks more about General Order 1.
does it?
Yeah, if the Comet and the civilization, if they should interfere with the...
Well, both episodes have elements of that. What did you think about that comment at the end of the first episode, though, where Starfleet is doubling down and they're calling it the Prime Directive? Do not interfere with.
Yeah, well, I mean, in this case, they didn't really
Yeah.
know. I mean, they only went there because they thought this planet had warp capabilities.
Right. They thought it was a first contact mission.
Yeah. They didn't go there, by themselves. It was like a mission that was from Starfleet, as far as I know.
Oh, the other thing. This really could have been like an episode out of the original series because they go down in disguise on the planet to rescue their the other officers who were captured. But what's different about this is they just don't, dress up in some funny costumes with some wigs or whatever. They actually have Chapel put some kind of, I don't know, what do we want to call it, like serum or something that basically modifies their genome in order to make them look more like the race of people on the planet.
Yeah, but that's the difference between modern Star Trek and
Yeah.
60s Star Trek. In 60s Star Trek, almost all aliens were just humans.
I mean, that is the difference, right? It's all about like budget and props and great CGI and, just how you can make a show that's so much better in quality with a bigger budget and how you can do all these things. I almost felt like they were making fun of themselves because Una says, "Oh, we should have come down in disguise." To me, I thought back to that made me think back to all the original episodes where they didn't even bother with disguise.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, you should always go in disguise.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several references to things like that. Like, did you notice, for example, that in the first episode, Pike does go, but in the second episode, Pike doesn't go on the away mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I attribute that to a difference in the captains, which we can talk about a little more in his character. One of the funny things is, of course, things never go right on an away mission or rescue mission or what have you. Spock's genome, unusual biology doesn't take so well to this change and comes out of it very quickly. Not halfway through their mission, which of course causes some problems. Naturally, and of course it's Spock, right? I mean, not just because of his biology, but when he's not looking like the natives, he definitely doesn't look like human either. He's got the pointy ears and everything else. So he's very obviously an alien walking around.
Yeah.
In full view of people.
Speaking of Spock, in the first episode, we do get another old character that comes to visit, which is T'Pring. We see Spock and T'Pring on Vulcan as adults talking, which is a bit of a retcon, honestly.
Yeah.
In the original series, in Amok Time, the only picture Spock has of T'Pring is of her as a child. And from the way he speaks of her, it's kind of implied that he only met her once as a child. And ever since then, they haven't met.
Correct. They went through the arranged bonding ritual as children, 7 years old or something. And like you said, they've not connected before. But it is really, truly retconned. That was my takeaway. Because apparently when we come in to see T'Pring and Spock on Vulcan, they've been courting for a year. And they get engaged at that time. I don't even know if that's like a necessary step if you're already like mentally bonded to somebody. Who knows? But it seems like they chose to court each other. And then obviously, choose to get engaged and choose to be physically together.
Yeah.
There's nothing that seems really prearranged about that. Maybe they got set up on a blind date and decided they liked each other and pursued it.
True. And you also don't really get the sense that, she seems to. She doesn't seem.
She's engaged with Spock to a level that's not like contempt in what we see in the original series.
Yeah, and she doesn't seem bothered by. Well, I mean, she does. She is a little bothered by him putting his work before her,
Right.
but she isn't bothered by him being half human, for example.
Yeah, and you would wonder, like, why would she propose to him if those things really bothered her?
Yeah.
So, but we might not know her character well enough. Who knows?
She returns. She returns in
Yeah,
later episodes.
I did like how forward she was and how she spoke her mind. I thought that was very in keeping with the little bit that we saw of her in the original series.
Yeah.
So yeah, Spock is just newly engaged when he gets a call from Pike to return to the Enterprise.
Well, I mean, he was kind of engaged since he was a kid, but yeah.
I mean, was he? They did mention that.
Yeah, I have no idea how they're
That's what
reconciling
I'm saying.
those
It's a
two.
little weird because all they mentioned was that, oh, we're having like an anniversary, our 1 year anniversary dinner since we started courtship.
And it's also interesting. Yeah, and also it's interesting because in the episode, Uhura was very in the original series episode. Uhura was shocked like everybody else to know
Right.
that Uhura and Chapel were shocked as everybody else to know that Spock, he's his wife basically.
Yeah.
And but in the show, it seems that he has been in a relationship for 10 years now, and it's not just like yeah. So that's weird.
That's actually a good point. I didn't think about that. You're right. Everybody. I actually went back and watched a Mook Time after I watched the first episode. You make a very good point. Everybody on that bridge was shocked. Kirk, McCoy, Chapel, Uhura, everybody on that bridge. Your wife?
Yeah.
Who's that?
You have a wife. Like we know Spock doesn't talk a lot about his family, but it seems weird that he'll be on this ship for 10 years and know these people and never mention, oh yeah, I'm married by the way.
Or at least have a fiance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we talk for a minute about the style of the show?
Don't you? But let's talk about the second episode first, and then we'll talk.
Okay, yeah, I didn't mean like the way they're presenting the episodes, the way the writing is. I meant, can we talk about just like the props? And I think one of the things that fascinated me most about the first episode was just looking at the similarities in the quote technology of the Enterprise and the things that they were using and how they really worked to kind of align them with what you see in the original series.
Yeah, I think they did a very good job. All the gumdrop buttons that light up, the big giant flashing ones, the colorfulness. Yeah, it's a very colorful show.
The big little like earpiece
Yeah.
for the communications station.
Yeah.
The captain's chair was big and bulky.
Yeah.
Just like Kirk's chair. The shuttles, very same design. The tricorder pieces, like big and bulky. The only thing that was a little bit different was the handheld data devices, kind of like tablets. Those were smaller and looked kind of like phones with just plastic on them.
Yeah.
Those were smaller, but like the communicator style was the same. I was applauding. I was mentally applauding, maybe physically applauding.
It looks really good.
Yeah, it looks good. I like the uniforms too. They're actually to me a mix between Abrams' verse uniforms and the simplistic design of the original series.
Yeah, those uniforms were there from Discovery season 2.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a good take on them. Yeah. I agree.
So visually, I was actually very pleased with the first episode.
I'm also going to say that you're going to see a return of the green wraparound shirt.
Ooh.
Sometimes wore.
That's the kind of spoiler I like.
Yeah.
I'll probably be laughing quite a lot when I see that.
Yeah, and also like they have a combination. Sometimes the crewmen wear shirts and pants, and sometimes there's mini skirts, the mini
Hmm.
dresses. They have both.
The only thing that kind of threw me a bit was Chapel's full-on white bodysuit.
Yeah, I honestly think that's from that's a mix of Discovery, but also the motion picture movie.
Yes, that harkened me back to the motion picture for sure.
Yeah,
Let me ask you: is Chapel, she's obviously not a head nurse? Is
yeah.
she just like, what is her rank?
I think she is a head nurse. Why isn't she a head nurse?
She is a head nurse in
That's what
Strange.
I understood. I think so.
I must have missed that because all I went was nurse. I put like Nurse Chapel question mark. I was like, what is her ranking?
I'm pretty sure she's a head nurse. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other nurses? Is it
Not that I know
is it
of.
just like a? It is fully a reprise of the original series where you've just got the doctor and the nurse.
I think so. So far, it seems so. Yeah.
Okay. Then she has to be the head nurse.
Yeah. I think
I think we touched on all the major pieces for the first
episode one.
episode.
Yeah. So episode 2 is kind of more standalone. Doesn't really call as much to Discovery. There is a planet that is about to be. It's a planet with a, let's say, less advanced society than the Federation. That is about to be hit by a comet. The Enterprise is tasked with, well, either diverting or destroying the comet so that it will not basically kill off all the life on the planet. But then they get into a problem because the comet isn't actually a comet. It's more like a self-navigating spaceship that is shaped like a comet. It doesn't have any life on it, but it does have a computer of sorts controlling it. And there is a race of aliens whose, I'm sorry, name I can't remember. Do you remember their name?
Shepherds, that's what they call themselves.
Shepherds. Yeah, the shepherds who sort of worship the comet and kind of um, protect it. And they say that if the comet chooses to hurt the planet, then the comet chooses, and the Enterprise has no right to intervene. Um, the Enterprise, of course, sends an away mission onto the comet spaceship, and well, that's the plot of the episode. Will the away team manage to solve the situation in time? Will the Enterprise be able to deal with the shepherds, etc., etc.?
So my favorite way to categorize the shepherds, and this is what Ortega says, is they're crazy space monks.
Yeah,
For very, very like strong religious beliefs, they are supposed to protect this arbitrator of life, which is how they
yeah,
refer to the comet. They even give it a name,
yeah,
like Mahanet, something like that.
yeah,
Um, they don't mind. They definitely don't mind attacking other people in order to protect the comet that they're escorting around the galaxy. They said they don't even know where these arbitrators of life came from. They just showed up one day, and the shepherds gained the purpose of, well, one, worshiping them, kind of,
yeah,
but or respecting what their quote purpose was. But they keep talking about how the comet's purpose is more so to bring life to planets, but if it does choose to like strike a planet and wipe it out, then that's could be preordained also.
yeah.
So the shepherds are very, very adamant that everybody else is a bystander, and the comet itself is going to do what it needs to do.
Honestly, this is actually, maybe it's not very clear from the way I told it, but this is actually more of a Uhura-centric episode.
Yes.
The episode actually opens with Uhura being invited to like this staff dinner at Captain Pike's quarters, and we have this very nice scene of like the senior staff and Uhura kind of talking and getting to know each other. It's a very nice scene, and like I said, we get to know more about Uhura in this one scene than we do for the entirety of the original series.
Yeah. She explains her background. She primarily explains that Starfleet was not a dream of hers. She just sort of ended up there because she didn't feel like she had a place, her family, what was left of it, or her home.
Yeah.
She was looking for a place to fit in, and direction. She needed
Yeah.
somewhere to go, something to do, so she ended up in Starfleet. I thought it was very interesting. They make the comment that it's not a bad thing that she's in Starfleet, and of course she's obviously very talented, and they all they know that from paper, but they also are going to get to see it in action. But her being there when she doesn't necessarily know if that's where she belongs, it takes away an opportunity from someone whose dream it is to be part of Starfleet.
Yeah, I mean, it's Spock specifically that makes this point.
Yeah.
Which is interesting considering what we learn about him in Discovery.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the most interesting part is that it's really not a comment that's made like with anger. He's not like mad at her for not being sure, but still taking up such a prime spot from someone who may have wanted it more. But it's more of like you should kind of think about this because you are affecting the lives of other people.
Mm-hmm. And then at the very end of the episode, once she has helped save the day, he comes back to her and says, well, you know that thing I said about, you thinking about it. Maybe you should also consider a little more strongly that you might actually be a fit for Starfleet.
Yeah.
It might be a good thing that you're here. And you're obviously talented, and Starfleet could use you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Spock does a lot of talking in this episode.
Spock does a lot of talking in this show.
That's also true.
It's an interesting take. He's very emotional in this show. He's a lot less, I must be a Vulcan, I must show less emotions. I'm honestly kind of wondering if they're going to go for a story where like he breaks up with T'Pring or something, and that's why he became like broody.
Broody or emotionally closed off.
Yeah.
Puts people at an arm's length. He's going through post-breakup trauma.
Yeah, I am wondering that.
Yeah.
Because I can see it.
So my impression of this episode, well, first off, the name of the episode, Children of the Comet, and then I just read the synopsis like before I started watching the episode. I went, is this like For the World is Hollow?
Yeah. I immediately thought about this, but no, it's a different thing.
It is, and it does turn out to be different. But the first few elements, the planet, they have a comet headed their way. The ship needs to divert the comet.
But the comet isn't a comet.
Yeah. The comet isn't a comet. It's actually a spaceship. There's a lot of elements I recognized. I really was very happy with the turn in the story where the shepherds showed up, caused some problems, and it turned out that the comet itself, it really is almost sentient, right? In a sense that Uhura learns how to communicate with it through music. They're singing. We get Spock and Uhura singing together. That was very nice. Also a little awkward.
It was cute, yeah.
Then, of course, we end the whole episode with this question of, was the comet actually going to strike the planet? Because it seems like Uhura figures out that it may really have been fate that, Spock got in his little shuttle and helped to break off a big piece of ice from the comet that changed its trajectory. And so instead it brings water to the planet that's like a desert planet.
Yeah.
Which means it's actually going to encourage life and help new life and grow on the planet, as opposed to destroying all the life there.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. This episode, I think, kind of discusses the Prime Directive more than the last one.
Yeah.
Because, I think if this would have happened, maybe it was an episode of the original series, I don't remember. If this would have happened in the next generation, the next generation, then Picard would have been like, oh, we can't intervene, we can't destroy the comet, that's how it is. I mean, like, No, as long as you don't actually communicate with the aliens, it doesn't mean you're just going to let them die. You can destroy
Yeah.
Comet. Um,
It's far
and
more in keeping with the original series, Soda.
yeah,
Because that whole episode where Kirk gets amnesia, ends up living on the planet for a while, the point of them actually being there in the first place is there's a comet headed to that planet and they're trying to divert it from its path.
yeah,
And that is a very, very pre-warp society. It's supposed, it's akin to like having a race of Native Americans.
yeah. That no, it's not akin to. They're actual Native Americans that somehow
Yeah, I'm
ended up.
not. They're tribal people. Let me just say that.
No, they say they're actually.
I know.
It is the stupidest episode.
It is
but
the
yeah,
stupidest
that was.
episode.
But
But you
yeah,
have the same elements. A tribal people who don't have a capacity to handle diverting the comet themselves.
they aren't even aware it's coming. I mean,
Yeah.
they can see
Well,
it.
I actually kind of differed on that perspective on the episode because every time we see the natives on the planet, they're looking up at the comet in the sky and they look concerned. And so I feel like they're aware of what's about to happen. They're like, that is not good. It shouldn't be this close. But again, they have no means to stop it. So
Yeah,
there's just a lot of elements in this episode that are so familiar just from Star Trek in general. It's still a new story. Um, they kind of put all the same elements we like, we're aware of, things that have happened in other episodes, and kind of told a similar but fresh story, which I appreciated.
um, yeah, and those are the two first episodes of Strange New Worlds.
Can we also just talk about the fact that I know Uhura is supposedly a prodigy. She speaks 37 languages, and
Yeah,
that was really what I think when she said that Pike went, okay, we're going to put you on we're going to give you this away mission. It's literally her very first away mission.
yeah,
These dangerous things happen. I mean, first off, Sam Kirk can't, he just is like, ooh, it's new. What is this? And, gets blasted and nearly dies. Total, like, stick your hand into the unknown first Kirk approach. Even if he was fascinated by it.
Seems to be going around in this family.
It does. But then, so obviously they're a landing party member down. He's in critical condition. He needs to go back to the ship. They can't get off the planet. They have no communications. They could all, basically die there. The thing might actually get rid of them. Who knows? She's a cadet. It's like her first time on a starship. And it's almost day 2 and or whatever, and she's on her first away mission, and she, it's all brand new to her. It reminded me a lot of Lower Decks.
Yeah,
Because it's from her perspective, really. She's the main star of sort of the episode, and it's, everything's new to her, and now she's just realizing how serious being in space can be, right?
yeah,
How dangerous
yeah.
it can be. I like that quite a lot. It's also, a good way to give Uhura the spotlight since.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the language thing; it's the music thing too. Because we know Uhura
Right.
plays music, she sings.
And
Yeah,
if you didn't know the Uhura character, you might not know that about her, because they don't really talk about that in the first episode. But obviously, you get to see that, yeah, not only is she a great linguist, but she's got musical talent.
yeah, exactly.
And maybe Spock does too.
Yeah,
We know
I
he
mean,
can
we
play
know he
instruments.
plays.
Have we ever
Yeah,
seen him sing?
I think he does in some of the early episodes of the original series.
Yeah.
No.
He looks so uncomfortable though. Because La'an was just like, "Don't look at me." Like, I can't help you with anything musical.
It's interesting. It's interesting that Lam is acting more Vulcan than Spock.
I know, and he almost does that look where you look around the room and everybody's staring at you like you're up.
Yeah. So yeah. I kind of want to go. I think we are done with the second episode. So I kind of want to talk more broad strokes
Yes.
about the show. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, like I said, I have the good, the bad, and the ugly to talk about. I will start with the good. I think even if you just watch those two first episodes, you can kind of see this show is episodic. It's going to have a story per episode. There are some like long, season long arcs for some characters, like um, Pike with his, I know my future. I know what's going to happen to me in 10 years.
I just call it his trauma.
It's drama, yeah,
Future, present, whatever. He's his trauma he's dealing with.
yeah.
Yeah.
Spock with his relationship with T'Pring.
Yeah.
Other characters will have their stories too. Um, but in general, it's an episodic show. Every episode has a different story, and I am so happy about that. The only other Star Trek episode show that currently airs that does this is Lower Decks.
I am so happy about that as well, Soda. I I immediately knew, even from the first episode, I'm okay. So there's some talk about things that went on Discovery, but what happened was concluded at the end. It wasn't left hanging. There were no cliffhangers. Like you said, there's a couple of overarching, I think, themes by character.
Yeah.
But it was truly like it had that feel of an episodic TV show. And then I went back and read an article that said they purposely decided it needed to be that kind of show.
Yeah. The thing about the modern Star Trek shows, Picard, Discovery, I'm watching them, and it's like they have season long arcs, season long storylines.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that you kind of feel like the show is constantly chasing the plot, and you do not get to know the characters.
Yeah.
And in this show, in just 2 episodes, you get to know so much about the characters, about who they are, get to relate to them. You get to know what it's like you get the sense of living on this ship.
Yeah.
Which I don't think you get in Picard or Discovery. Which is a shame, because I think that's part of the fun of getting to know this universe. How's the everyday life on ship? What do you do every day when there isn't like a universe-threatening, disaster on the horizon? And that's the beauty of that was the beauty of every Star Trek show before the modern era, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm
Agreed.
glad we are kind of returning to that. And I think that's a big part of the show's appeal.
It also means that if you fall behind, you're not necessarily falling behind, right?
Yeah.
It's like turn on the TV and an episode's playing and you haven't seen the last 3, you won't be as lost as you would be in a show like Picard. Where everything that's happened in the previous episodes has been to move that main plot forward. I think that's great, because it means probably that people can return back to Strange New Worlds once the first season is aired and go back and just watch the parts that they really like watch the episodes that were the best episodes.
Exactly. It's much easier to have like a favorite episode if everything is episodic. If you don't you have to understand this and this and that,
yeah.
Yeah.
It obviously makes it so much more consumable to broader audiences that way, and to introduce it to new people, because one of the best things about being a loving Star Trek is if you want your family member to come watch an episode, you're gonna pick like what you think is the best episode, or the funniest episode, or the weirdest episode, and you guys can just watch it together, and they don't necessarily have to have a lot of background.
Yeah.
They can watch it for the entertainment value. So, yeah, it's just a smart move. Glad to see episodic TV show return.
Yeah, and I'm also glad we got back to being hopeful and moralizing. Discovery has done this more in the last season or two, but I feel like Picard is still kind of in the dark and broody stage. And Lower Decks is cute, but it's not like it. Lower Decks is less about having a hope for the future and more about the fun characters. and the stories.
And
Um,
dealing with all the crap that gets thrown your way as a
exactly,
lower deck ensign.
exactly. But no, Stranger Worlds is genuinely like hopeful, and it has moral points to make every episode, and I think it's cute. I like that you are going back to that. I think it's something that Star Trek has that other franchises just don't have, and that's always been one of the biggest selling points of the franchise.
And it also just connects it more to the shows that came before it.
Yeah,
Um, it just, yeah, it just makes you feel it is a genuine Star Trek moral type of show.
yeah,
Yeah. Even in the end of the first episode, we get the moral like explained to us, or like
yeah.
by Pike himself.
By himself. Yeah,
And sometimes it ends on questions, like in the second episode: is it fate, or is fate what you make of it,
yeah.
or some things just fated to be?
Also, I felt like the characters I think are strong. I think they have
Mm,
a very strong sense of character. Even if you don't see a lot of them, you kind of get what they're about.
yeah.
So yeah, that's also something I kind of missed in a lot of Star Trek shows currently. Um, I like Discovery. I don't like Picard. um, but I think that this show does a lot of things that Discovery doesn't do right. This show does it right.
One of the goods for me is, well, Captain Pike himself.
Yeah,
He's not a Kirk per se. Definitely not a Picard.
yeah,
um, there's just things about him. He's kind of like captains we've seen before, but he's got his own thing going on. I really like the fact that he brings back the captain who wants to be close to his crew. I mean, we see that
yeah.
in the second episode where he's hosting dinner in his quarters. He's cooking for his crew members.
Very reminiscent of Cisco.
Yeah, which is just reminiscent of Cisco, but it gives you more that like the captain doesn't want to be at an arm's length, or is socially awkward, or
Yeah,
doesn't really connect well with his crew. You get back to more of that family sense.
exactly. Yeah,
Pike says things like, "I love this ship," by which he means he loves his crew, right?
yeah.
So those give me good feelings.
Yeah, it's nice to watch a crew that actually is both professional but also is like a family.
Yeah,
That's. I mean, I think Discovery does that too. Yeah, Picard style. Picard is kind of a tough show to talk about in that sense because it's not a classic Star Trek
yeah.
captain and crew show. But yeah, Discovery actually does that too after the second season. Like the third, fourth seasons are more like the crew is a family. But
Mm-hmm.
the problem, as I said, the problem with Discovery is that a lot of the characterization kind of goes by the wayside because we're constantly busy chasing the plot of the season, which is usually like the universe threatening
Mm-hmm.
problem, and there is no time for like fun times with the crew.
The other thing I like about Captain Pike, as a character, making him one of the good things for me, he obviously likes to follow the rules.
Yeah,
But he'll do something different when you put him in a position where he can't do anything else. Or in the first episode where he just thinks, well, the people who broke the rules in the first place are kind of the Federation itself or Starfleet itself. Like, we have to take responsibility. Like, we don't have a
yeah,
choice but to get involved. Or, in a sense, he will follow his gut. Like, it's the right thing to do to come down and talk to this pre-warp society and try to help them see past their need to just fight each other and be violent and potentially destroy their civilization because they can't get past it.
yeah,
um, I don't see like a brashness in him. I see him calculating the odds, trying to figure out what's the right way to do it and still follow the rules. But at the same time, seems to me like he's got a strong moral compass. and
yeah.
he will let that override following the rules once or twice. So he's not a Kirk to me quite, but he's not far off from a Kirk. Um,
Yeah,
See, and
he's
he doesn't go on his all his missions.
yeah.
He's not like
I mean,
front and center in the action.
I think we're onto something when we say that he's maybe more like Cisco than any
Yeah.
other captain. He's like he has some kind of like a crazy streak, but he's not ruled by it like Kirk. Um,
You have to activate it.
yeah,
It's not it's part of his loving, like, being in the thick of it
yeah,
the way
exactly.
Kirk does.
Yeah.
So
So now for the bad, unless you have something to add.
well, we talked about some other good elements, and we're going through this stuff. The visuals are good.
Yeah,
Trying to keep some continuity with just the technology, and worked really well. There's some characters I was really happy to see them give more role, like more background to. Thank you for putting Mbinga in the show. I
yeah,
He's going to be very interesting, even if it does kind of retcon some stuff or whatnot. I don't know, but I'm basically looking forward to several of the characters. So, made good choices, character choices. There's one other thing. Oh, we talked about it. Yeah, not just episodic, but going by like moral of the story type theme.
yeah, yeah.
I like that. I've always liked that.
Me too.
Okay, what's the bad?
Yeah, the bad. Well, first of all, yeah, we discussed that there are quite a few retcons in the series. I'm not going to say they are outright bad. Retcons happen. Um, I am going to say that I think we're going back from, since Deep Space Nine, the shows, well, okay, not Voyager, but since Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, Discovery, even Picard, which I don't like, but they are kind of, they look at the Federation with a little more of a critical eye. Like the original series and especially the Next Generation were very, the Federation is great. It's the paragon of virtue that everyone should aspire to.
They have a kind of arrogance
Yeah,
about
and
their own like setup.
yeah, and I feel like this show is kind of going back to that.
Hmm.
We do see by kind of, in the first episode, like you said, in the first episode, he's like, no, the Federation messed this up. The Federation needs to clean it. But it's also like a dangling plot thread from Discovery.
Hmm.
Um, in other episodes, there are some episodes where they're kind of critical, but in a lot of them, it's kind of like, the Federation is great. And
Our
I
way
don't know.
is the best way.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I see where you're going there. Hmm.
And uh, I also kind of see Discovery going this way a little bit in season 4, especially when we see how many species that join the Federation when we know their culture is not like it doesn't really fit with the Federation. So the Ferengi and the Cardassians join the Federation, and it's like, do we really need to, to divest all of these people from their own cultures because the Federation is the best?
Hmm.
Um, there is something. I think there is something that the show should be very careful with, being uncritical of the Federation like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. There were times where the original series felt very preachy. There were definitely like subliminal messages there when, especially when they're alluding to like the Cold War going on or Vietnam, and you should be on the side of the Allies, it's the right side.
yeah,
That kind of underlying message, it doesn't leave you with a good feeling. A great federation is a federation that protects everybody's culture and tries to understand each other, not necessarily, and that includes people who are not part of the federation, right?
yeah,
Just because it's a new race and you think you're a peaceful organization doesn't mean you need to bully people into joining you
yeah,
on your mission or whatever it is. My hope is that as the seasons continue of Strange New Worlds, they start to come to the realization that the Federation is not a fit for everybody. and that the
Yeah, I
Federation
hope.
itself has its own problems.
Yeah, I really hope so. Yeah,
I don't necessarily want to see the kind of sabotage that we got in the Abrams verse, where you had,
yeah, no, that's
mysterious like Section 31s trying to start a war and all that stuff.
yeah, that's too much. But
That's too much.
Section 31 exists in the
Yeah,
universe. It exists since Deep Space Nine. But it does pay to acknowledge that the Federation isn't perfect.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's not like Section 31 itself is a bad thing. It's who's in charge of it. It's
yeah,
always the few people in positions of power who are very zealous about whatever they think is the right way or the right path for the Federation, and it causes a
yeah,
lot of pain and suffering to others, even unintentionally. And sometimes it's just purely aggressive. Yeah.
yeah,
But that's what comes with being a federation. You have all types of personalities and people with ambition, and not everybody's gonna do want to do things the non-violent way.
exactly.
So, yeah. What else was on the bad for you?
Well, let's talk about Spock. Yeah, the interpretation of Spock is, let's call it interesting. I know that a lot of people were very deeply disappointed by the return of T'Pring and the relationship he has with her in the show. Um, it's a choice. It's an interesting choice. I appreciate them trying to. I mean, they give T'Pring more character. She gets a lot more focus here than she ever did before. And I like her character, but I also kind of, do you remember when the Abrams movies came out and people kind of wondered, wait, are they sticking Spock with Uhura because of all the Spock and Kirk shippers?
Yeah.
I'm starting to wonder, first they stick him with Uhura, now they retcon his relationship with T'Pring. It seems kind of like a trend, is what I'm saying. They absolutely have to establish Spock as being heterosexual, so no one will suspect anything else.
Yeah, that would be quite unfortunate. I think Spock, I think his character stands better on its own when he's not involved in a relationship that might make him emotional. I don't know. I prefer seeing Spock develop friendships rather than romantic relationships. That's just a personal preference of mine.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people also kind of. It's not necessarily a lot of people are
Yeah.
like, no, Spock must be gay. It's a lot of people are like, maybe he's just not interested in romance at all.
Yeah.
And the shows and the movies keep insisting, no, no, he has to have a girlfriend. He has to have a wife. He
Yeah.
has to. A lot of people are kind of disappointed. Yeah.
Yeah. I like seeing Spock's journey to humanity. I mean, I think we've talked about how that is like a quintessential part of his character
Yeah.
is coming to appreciate or at least find balance with his human half. Um, from that perspective, I can kind of appreciate him being in a relationship with T'Pring because if they're not going to completely retcon this, T'Pring was never fully okay with him being like half human.
Yeah.
That could have been a point of contention between them, but maybe he is just focusing more on doing things Vulcans do, which is engage in courtships with
Yeah.
their prearranged person.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I can appreciate like maybe it's just they wanted to give him more normal Vulcan things to do cuz we don't really know what common things Vulcans like to do cuz they're always so mysterious.
True.
Yeah, does he really need a girlfriend when he's, while he's out gallivanting around the universe like she said?
Yeah, I mean,
I
like I
don't
said,
know.
I appreciate it from the point of view of like bringing back T'Pring because
Yeah.
she's an interesting character, and there isn't a lot of other ways to bring her. But at the same time, yeah, her relationship with Spock seems kind of out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the people that say that it seems like the studio is just so afraid of Spock being seen as anything but heterosexual that they just have to stick him with a girlfriend in every iteration.
But just look how popular the Star Trek shows are,
Yeah,
regardless of who you stick in a heterosexual relationship.
yeah,
People are going to ship what they ship.
exactly.
Anyway, I see where you're coming from. It is sort of out of left field, but at the same time, it's a relationship we knew was there. But we had never had any idea to what extent.
I mean, like I said, in the original series episode, Mock Time, he only had a picture of her as a little girl.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I think it was fair to assume he didn't see her since then.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is it wasn't like an Abrams where they paired him with Uhura, and that was really out of left field.
Yeah.
And everybody just went, what? If at that time they had said, oh, well, he's got his girlfriend on Vulcan to Pring and whatever, people would be like, oh, I remember that person. That was from that one episode. It was might have been more palatable than, pairing him with Uhura, except for the few times they played instruments together or she made a comment to him. There's really no basis for that. We thought this was a good idea.
Exactly.
But so again, in that context, putting Spock and T'Pring front and center as a relationship, we think that's a good idea. I mean, I get why you're questioning it. Why do you have to do that? Is there a reason for that? But you're not going to stop people from shipping Spock with whoever.
Yeah, and also, they included Chapel in here, which we also know, and there are starting to drop hints that she's developing feelings for him too.
And that, at least, is not a surprise.
Yeah.
For fans of the original series. It was a little soon for me, though. Uhura right away catches it like, oh, Chapel's flirting with you.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't have a girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. I'm like, dude, you have a fiance. And you've done a lot more than just flirt with her.
Yeah.
You guys were getting kind of frisky back there on Vulcan.
Yeah.
If Pike hadn't interrupted you. Which also, to me, is sort of a retcon. I guess because from the original series, Spock, I always took him to not really experienced with the physicality of a romance.
Not just not experienced. He seemed to think it's like, he's like, oh, it's succumbing to your, emotions and urges and not logical. And yeah.
We keep tight control of that, and we don't do that, and it's only because of these happy spores that I would ever kiss you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Although, contrary to that, he does engage in some pretty serious flirting with that Romulan commander.
Yeah.
But he just seems so much more, I guess, in that part with T'Pring, he seems so much more relaxed and like confident in what he was doing. Exactly. With T'Pring and just gauging with T'Pring, so that threw me a little bit. And yet they try to play it off like he's still very awkward with humans and doesn't understand human things.
And I think this kind of leads into the ugly section.
Okay.
The ugly section for me is kind of what I'm worried for when it comes to the future of the show. And it ties back into the fact that most of these characters, we know where they end up. This is a prequel, and we know what's going to happen to them. We know what's going to happen to Pike. The thing that happens to Pike is like a plot on the show.
Yeah.
We know how Spock is going to be like. We know what's going to happen to Uhura. We know what's going to happen to Chapel. We know what's going to happen to them, which is like...
We even know what's going to happen to Sam Kirk.
Yeah, exactly.
Better not get invested in that guy.
Yeah, so that's what I'm worried about, because I get a feeling it just kind of annoys me. It's like it didn't have to be this kind of show. It didn't have to be a prequel. You could have just made a new show with a new crew and just give them those personalities, because you're already using characters that didn't really have a character and expanding on them. You could have just did it with new characters, but you chose to do a prequel with an almost all familiar cast. So it's like, first of all, why? But second of all, it's very limiting. It's limiting when you know what's going to happen in the future. That's why most prequels don't work, because you already kind of know what's going to happen.
Usually, the only reason prequels work is because there was more story about a particular set of characters. Or, for instance, if you're looking at one generation of a family, you're looking at the previous generation of the family. Like, you might not know all the details of what happened to them that got them to present day.
Yeah.
And for people who are really, really invested in a particular like concept or show, they will definitely watch the prequel because they want to see how. But at the same time, like they want to see how it's going to play out. But a lot of the times, you introduce a whole bunch of new characters even in a prequel, and you will take characters that people just don't know a lot about and run with those. I agree with you. The main crew, half of them are well established in some sense. There's already high expectations. For me, it's not quite ugly because I feel like they have time to do better with
I
it.
put it in the ugly because the more episodes I watched,
Yeah.
the more I got a sense of like, okay, this is happening because I know it has to happen. But I'm finding myself wondering, but what if it didn't have to happen? Like
Yeah.
you
Okay.
purposely limited yourselves by using those characters that you know where they're going to end up.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? All the good things about the show, the characterization, the fact that it's episodic, the fact that they went back to, hopefulness and moralizing. You could have done that with original characters. You didn't have to go back for that.
Do you think because Pike and Spock and Uhura, to name a few, even Chapel, have these already set paths before them, like will do certain things. We know they will do certain things. Do you think that's going to limit the number of seasons they can squeeze out of Strange New Worlds?
I don't know if it will. I mean, I don't think they'll run it endlessly. Most Star Trek show, they cap out at 7 seasons, which I can see for this show too.
Right, but what if it ends up more like a 3 season show because they get to the punchline too quick?
They could do that. Honestly, I hope they don't run out of gas. That's what I'm hoping for. Like, once you establish that Chapel has feelings for Spock, where do you go from there? She can't do anything with them because we know by the original series she didn't do anything with them by then. So like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a dead end story. Once you establish that Spock and T'Pring are kind of on and off again relation, not an on again off again, but like the relationship isn't very good. What do you do then? They can't be in a good relationship. We know in the original series they aren't.
So
Um,
here's my take: Chapel's crush on Spock. Maybe they will show it, but not focus on it. That would be great because maybe they could talk more about like why was Chapel with that Roger guy who went missing and building like robots, or android bot of
yeah,
himself.
yeah.
There's other things.
I know there are other things, but as I said, I don't want to spoil you too much. But as
Yeah.
I said, they are already starting to focus on some of those things, and I'm like, you're writing yourselves into a corner here, guys.
Yeah. So in that respect, how do you feel about Mbinga? Because
Um,
he's introduced in the original series as like the Vulcan expert doctor.
he actually gets more characterization. You're going to see next episode, I think, by
Is
episode
it
three.
in is it in
He gets
relation to Spock? And like
no,
if it's not
no,
in relation to Spock, that's going to be great because
yeah.
I always thought they could do more with the Mbinga character than just have him like show up and slap Spock a few times to
Oh no,
get him out of
he
a
gets
trance.
yeah. No, he gets his own story. It's actually interesting.
Okay, that's good.
You're going to see.
I'm on board with Uhura at least because she's a cadet and she's like just freshly into Starfleet and not even sure she's should be there, but yet she's got a lot of talent. Like I'm all for seeing her grow as a
Yeah,
character.
yeah. That's going to be interesting.
Chapel I was concerned about, one because her major point in the original series, like you said, is her crush on Spock. And in the original series, she seems sort of like a mature character.
Yeah.
um, at least in the way she handled things. But so when I saw her character in the first episode, and she was kind of She had this energy I didn't expect.
I actually I like that. I like that about her.
It threw me off, but I was like appreciative of that it was a little different. And so it
Yeah,
makes me wonder if she'll at least have an arc, gives her more personality, first off. Um,
yeah. Oh, she does. I think she definitely has more
oh,
personality in this
yeah.
show.
But also shows how she develops as a professional, maybe. I don't know. I think for me, the disparity between Christine Chapel in the original series and what we kind of saw in Strange New Worlds is a bigger gap. So I'm just curious. She makes me curious.
Yeah, she's an interesting character. Again, I
Yeah,
like that they expand on these characters that didn't get a lot of,
yeah.
you know, screen time when they were there, but like they are also kind of writing themselves into corners with them.
So with Samuel Kirk, I just kind of feel bad for him. I like every time
Yeah,
he's on screen, I'm like, oh, you're so happy and like you're so interested in what you're doing. Ooh, cool, you're in like xenoanthropology. I don't know what that is, but that's awesome. And yet I know where you're gonna end up.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
actually afraid in a sense because we know his ending is not good. Um,
yeah.
like that they will make you like him and then you'll just regret it.
That's sad. Apart from that, another thing that scares me is, well, the thing about Discovery and also Lower Decks is that it's pretty diverse, right?
Yeah.
But Strange New Worlds is wider, straighter, uh, more, it's not diverse. It's pretty, we have Uhura, we have Kyle, we have Ortega's, and that's it, basically.
And Binga.
Mabenga, yeah. And that's, most of the captain is white, the number one is white. I'm kind of afraid that because it's going to be, I think it's going to be more popular because it's episodic and happier and lighter. I'm afraid that it's going to be more popular, and the executives are going to look at it and say, "Oh, people just want another TNG, basically, another
Yeah.
next generation."
Whereas, look what they did with Discovery. They put Discovery out and did really well with it, and they had a pretty diverse, like,
Yeah,
cast.
yeah. The problems with Discovery in comparison to Strange New Worlds has nothing to do with like diversity.
Yeah.
It has to do with writing, with writing basically.
Yeah.
But you know how executives think, so
Yeah, so you're
I am
afraid
worried about
they
that.
will see a less diverse show become popular and like well received and just think that that's good enough as the status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get more diversity with the aliens. I mean, they are aliens.
Well,
You could pass it off.
but that's kind of what we've been getting all along.
Yeah.
The beauty of Discovery is that they dare to put like the cap you know most of the characters in Discovery are not white straight people,
Right.
and that was nice. Finally, for all that Star Trek has always been very progressive as a TV show, it's also was kind of a product of its time.
Well, I mean, they have an opportunity to do some things with some of the less well-known characters. I think Christopher Pike is pretty much a set stereotype.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about Una? I mean, okay, we know she might have feelings for Pike, like that's sort of a thing that came out in their plot in that pilot episode or whatever, but there's a whole lot about her that is a mystery. Maybe they could squeeze in some things there. I don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know yet.
The Noonien Singh character, she's a big question mark to me. She actually kind of scares me.
In what regard is she a question mark?
In the first episode, she's taking up his like second in command. When number one, the actual number one, is back, what is she, like the security chief?
Lan, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so she's becoming the security chief. She's very tough.
Yeah.
When she explained like what she had been through, which sounded very horrific, by the way.
Oh yeah. I mean, we completely forgot to talk about the Gorn.
That was not like a pretty reprisal of the Gorn.
Yeah, and it's interesting considering what they do with them in the original series because Arena is my favorite episode of the original series.
Yeah.
And it is my favorite episode specifically because I thought the way they handled the Gorn was original. But this show kind of seems to retcon it.
Yeah. I will say, okay, it retcons what's like done in the original series. But if you had ever read like the Abrams verse comics where they added more episodic missions and backstory on different species, the Gorns that are talked about in those comics are it's a lot very similar to what the kind of the trauma story about meeting the Gorns, that La'an shares. Anyway, my concern with her is she's very tough. She's very like closed off from people. She says people it's difficult, right? Being around people is difficult. Like they're a challenge for her. And it makes me worried that she's sort of a young Michael because of her trauma. What would you do if she ends up like in a similar situation that triggers her and she snaps? Is she gonna go like shoot a bunch of people? it, I don't know. I don't have a good sense for her character yet, but she's very closed off and very tough.
All I can say is wait.
Wait. Okay.
They are going to address this.
This is good because if you just went off based of right out of the gate, you're like she's a little scary. I would stand on the other side of the room from her.
Yeah.
And she would be fine with that because guess what? She doesn't want to deal with people.
Yeah.
But then also knowing that that she really truly does have a connection to Khan scares me more. it doesn't make me feel better.
I think she's an interesting character. I like her so far. They address most of the points you brought up.
Okay.
In the next few episodes.
That's good. Because I think she has a lot of potential because usually when you start off with a character that is that badly traumatized and tough and closed off and also comes from a dubious background, you have a lot of room to work with their arc. Yeah. A lot of room to work with their story and how they develop. So I have no idea about Hemmer. All I know is he's just like, do you think me being blind is a disability? Because I say otherwise.
Yeah, I think Hemmer is kind of one-dimensional so far.
Which is a shame because I was wondering if, with the way Spock and Hemmer were competing over telepathic abilities, made me wonder if they're going to have sort of a McCoy-Spock relationship.
Not really, so far.
so far, but that could just be because he doesn't get a lot of screen time.
Yeah, they really don't focus on Hammer that much so far. That's all I can say. I hope that changes because he does seem interesting.
He does. He's very like, Andorians are better, and of course, Spock's gonna be like, Vulcans are better.
Yeah.
That would be fun. In a sense.
But to go back a little to the Gorn, I would have to actually put it under the bad category, not the ugly category, because look, what I liked about Arena is that you get this species that is like monsters. It looks monstrous. You think there is no way to reason with them, and then you kind of get the sense that maybe we were in the wrong. Maybe we didn't try to understand them enough. And this show is like, no, they are monsters. I don't like that. I thought the point the original series made was better. I like that version better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, the way they presented them wasn't too much of a surprise to me, but I did feel squeamish after hearing some of that stuff.
Because it makes them one-dimensional, and one-dimensional villains are not good.
Yeah. Again, that's my other concern, because if you go back to like Michael in Discovery and where she came from and how her parents died, it seems like she harbored some resentment over that.
Yeah.
She, had certain feelings about Romulans, right? Klingons.
Klingons.
Sorry, Klingons. Yeah. She had certain feelings about Klingons. Obviously, Liana, would surely have certain feelings about Gorns. So, if that being the
But
case, are they going to bring them back as an actual villain?
they seem to be. It seems to me to be headed this way, and
Okay.
I hope I'm wrong, but that's where it seems to be headed. That they are like this one-dimensional villain. I mean, how do you redeem a villain that does what they did to family or colonies?
Right.
I mean, maybe they could. I mean, the Cardassians also did horrific things, and Deep Space Nine did make them three-dimensional, but who knows?
Yeah. Question, because you've seen more episodes than I have. Now, you don't necessarily have to spoil me, but uh obviously in the other Star Trek shows we have like a main antagonistic race.
Yeah.
Like the thorn in the side of the Federation every once in a while.
Yeah.
Do we have that in Strange New Worlds, or are we going to get that?
It seems to be the Gorn.
It seems to be the Gorn. See, again, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm like, why would you mention the Gorn so easily? Make that backstory. Have a character who is traumatized by the Gorn be on your ship, and who, if she saw a Gorn, would probably want to attack first and talk later.
Yeah.
Is the Gorn going to be that villain?
It seems to be that way, yeah.
Okay.
And it's also interesting because, much like the Romulans, no one has seen the Gorn yet.
Okay.
So they're keeping the fact that, like, Kirk was the first one to see Gorn. But, if in Star Trek Enterprise we saw the Romulans, maybe they are also going to see the Gorn now before they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Interesting. Well, Soda, I feel like you and I are going to have to
keep up with the show.
Keep up with the show just to find answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm enjoying this so far, despite my concerns and my criticism. It's a good show.
Mm-hmm. That's where I ultimately landed after that very first viewing of the first episode left me unsure. Now that I think back on it, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact I didn't have that Discovery background. It just made the episode off for me because, if you have a viewer who doesn't quite understand how things are happening or why, it takes them out of the story.
Yeah.
And so they don't connect to it as well. Once I had kind of got a better feeling for what was going on and rewatched it, I enjoyed it so much more. And I really enjoyed the second episode, and that was, I only watched it one time, and I was like, okay, look, they're singing, and there's this alien thing with lights, and oh, look, there's a very zealotous race that is shoot first.
Yeah.
I get all this. This is definitely Star Trek. So I left the second episode with feeling pretty happy about I got a Star Trek episode that I'm familiar with, and characters that I want to know more about or that I appreciate, and okay, I'm feeling good.
Nice.
I did want to go watch the next episode. I just stopped myself.
Yeah, but I do recommend you watch it. I enjoy it very much.
So all of that said, I will continue to watch the show. I might watch it a little slower than you, but I will be watching it. The major positives for me is the hopeful message, the episodic format, and there's some characters that I like.
Exactly.
What more could you ask for?
Exactly. It's just the ABC of a good show.
Yep. Yeah.
So those were our thoughts, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you have something to add.
No, I don't. I think that summarizes what we saw very well. My only question to you would be, what do you think is the temperature of other viewers?
I think it's been very well received.
Okay. I didn't know.
I think that's what the Star Trek fandom has been kind of waiting for.
Kind of a blast from the past.
Yeah, an episodic, hopeful show, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That is our little quick discussion, maybe not so quick, on the first two episodes of Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
Soda and I will definitely continue to keep you updated on how we feel about this show, how you guys feel about this show, and until next time.
See you.